I had his child. Get out, you old hag. Rue had a triumphant look on her face. I quietly stared at her. Rue is Charlton's mistress. I don't know where he found her, but suddenly, she appeared in our lives. Rue proudly showed off a picture of the baby. That baby seemed to be Rue's trump card. He said he's going to make this child the heir to the company. He has no interest in your kids. Is that so? I remained calm. At this point, it couldn't be helped. Rue would soon fall from her high horse. Rue, that child isn't your trump card. Charlton will trap you with him and it will lead to your downfall. My name is Susan, 35 years old. My husband, Charlton, is the president of his company. He took what was once a small family workshop and turned it into a large corporation. Charlton is like that, but to be honest, our relationship isn't good. Charlton and I had an arranged marriage. Our parents hit it off before we really got to know each other, and our marriage followed. I didn't know how to go against my parents, so I married Charlton without hesitation or doubt. And I regretted it. Charlton is disciplined but even more of a womanizer. Even before our marriage, he had several mistresses. Who do you think you have to thank for being able to call yourself the president's wife? Charlton would regularly ask me that. I was teaching our son in his room when I looked up and replied, "Because you worked hard to grow the company." That's right. I gave the same answer as before, but Charlton, unbothered, was still pleased. You're lucky. You just happened to meet me and my parents liked you. That's the only reason you're in this position. So, you want to replace me with another woman? I responded with a cheerful laugh. Charlton had a grim look on his face. It's not like that. Then why do you ask such things? To make you understand. You are living comfortably solely because of my efforts. Yes, yes. I was fed up with conversations with Charlton. Charlton always looked down on me. I am plain in looks and I have no particular talents. He may regret marrying such an uninteresting woman. But I felt the same regret. People called me the CEO's wife, but in reality, my life was no different from housewife's. I woke up at the same time every day, did the housework, and took care of our 5 sons. I've continued this life up to today. And I can say with certainty, this marriage was a mistake. We should have taken more interest in each other before agreeing to the marriage. If we had, I would have noticed Charlton's cold nature. And if Charlton had talked to me a bit more back then, he wouldn't have chosen me as his wife. But we didn't do that. Without any mutual interest, we accepted the marriage our parents arranged. In the midst of this cold atmosphere, my son Amadeus spoke up. Mom, I finished my homework. Well done, Amadeus. You can have a snack as a reward. Yay! Amadeus cheered and got up from his chair. As he was about to leave the room, Charlton stopped him. Amadeus. You promised to work on the math drills I prepared for you next, right? But I spoke up for Amadeus, who was hesitant. Amadeus is still young. Don't be so hard on him. And what about you? Amadeus is my heir. He must become more accomplished than I am. Charlton folded his arms. He seemed determined not to let Amadeus leave the room. I sighed and proposed a compromise. Then let's study in the room while having a snack. I'll keep an eye on him, and you can go back to work. Fine. Charlton seemed to agree. Even so, he couldn't resist giving a parting remark. You got a B last semester? Pathetic. When I was your age, I always had straight A's. You just need to study to get better grades. Yes. Amadeus hung his head. He had been proud of his test performance. When he showed me his answer sheet, his eyes were shining. But Charlton's words had clouded that shine in an instant. I worked hard on my studies. You need to study harder. You're not as smart as I am, so you have to work even more. That's enough. Those words were too harsh to ignore. I frowned and spoke up. It's one thing to belittle me, but stop undermining Amadeus's efforts. If the results aren't there, then he didn't try hard enough. Or maybe your teaching is the problem. What did you say? My voice was sharp. But Charlton, indifferent, responded coldly. You can't even raise your own child properly. Maybe we should hire a tutor immediately. It's not Mom's fault. In a voice almost in tears, Amadeus defended me. It's my fault. I'll study more. So please, don't speak badly of Mom. You're in a tough spot too, Amadeus, sticking up for a mother like that. That's enough. Go back to work, I repeated firmly. Charlton smirked and turned his back on us. Right. Unlike you, I'm busy. Glad you understand, Susan. Just go. I'll take full responsibility for raising Amadeus. I held Amadeus close. Amadeus nestled in my arms, softly sobbing. Charlton had found himself a new mistress. He made no effort to hide her existence. Indeed, he brought her along to a corporate party attended by company executives. Dressed in attire provided by Charlton, his mistress was still young and beautiful. I'm Rue. Nice to meet you. I'm Susan, his wife. Rue greeted me with a confident demeanor. Yet, she never disclosed her job title or position. She claimed to aspire to be a model, currently without employment. Where exactly had Charlton found such a person like Rue? I'm indebted to your husband for many things. I'm sure you are. Charlton was indifferent towards his family but displayed kindness towards his mistress. From what I could tell, he was providing for Rue in every aspect of life. Because of that, Rue exuded confidence. It was clear from her eyes that she harbored ambitions to displace me and take my place as the rightful wife. However, I remained composed. I was accustomed to Charlton having mistresses. Even before we married, he was known for his flamboyant affairs. There was no need for me to be flustered by yet another new mistress. I reassured myself of that fact. Yet, Rue's actions exceeded my expectations. Hello. Today, at your husband's request, I thought we'd have a Western-style meal, Rue said cheerfully. Her face already made up beautifully. She promptly stood in the kitchen and began to cook efficiently. Not only cooking but also taking the lead in cleaning the room and handling laundry. Are there any foods you don't like? Not particularly, but that's good to hear. Then I can cook with peace of mind. Something was off. That was my thought. Rue is different from Charlton's previous mistresses. I understand that she harbors a sense of rivalry towards me. However, she manages it skillfully. Rue comes every day at a set time. She takes over household chores for me and leaves satisfied. She also casually strikes up conversations with me. Let's be friends, Susan. Yes. I found myself nodding to Rue's enthusiasm. True to her words, Rue was effective. She provides topics like a friend would, making me laugh. One day, I was exhausted. Between chores and taking care of my sons, I was drained. Good job. With those words, Rue brewed tea for me. I was grateful. I even sent her home with a souvenir upon her departure. Rue was smiling too. Thank you. You're a good person, ma'am. She bowed repeatedly as she said that. Her submissive nature surprised me. Where did her initial defiance go? I find myself liking Rue, but also feeling perplexed. Rue has her sights set on Charlton. In other words, she's my enemy. Yet, why does she act so friendly? I'm starting to get confused. At that moment, "Susan, please listen," Rue whispered. "Charlton has been saying bad things about you. He warned me to keep it secret from you, but I couldn't stay silent." "It's nothing new." I shrugged. "He always undermines Amadeus and I. It must be tough for you to hear such things." "Susan, you are not a bad person." Rue frowned, her cute face contorted. "Honestly, Charlton is too harsh on Susan. He doesn't even acknowledge the effort she puts into taking care of the boys and the hardships she endures." She expressed her dissatisfaction with Charlton for a while before chuckling ruefully. "Please keep this between us, okay?" "I know," I said with a wry smile. Rue is Charlton's mistress. If her negative attitude towards Charlton were to be exposed, she would quickly find herself in a difficult situation. But despite the risks involved, why was Rue siding with me? The mystery was unraveled by Amadeus's words. "Mom, you shouldn't trust that person." "That person? You mean Rue?" "Yeah." Amadeus nodded, his face pale with fear. "Because that person has been bad-mouthing you to Dad behind your back. And now, talking bad about Dad to you." "No way." I was somewhat shocked. I knew that Rue wasn't on my side, yet when Amadeus revealed the truth, it hurt my heart. The feeling of betrayal. Could there be some mistake? Is Rue really doing that? "Yeah! I saw it!" Amadeus exclaimed, taking my hand. "Don't be fooled! That person is your enemy." Amadeus's words shook me. I couldn't afford to laugh off Rue's words as usual, even if she spoke things that seemed considerate. "Susan." Rue looked at me with concerned eyes. "Are you okay, ma'am? Are you feeling unwell?" "It's not that." I hurriedly shook my head. Inside, I was conflicted. Should I confront Rue with the truth, or should I continue our relationship as if nothing had changed? I finally mustered up the courage to speak. "My son told me something interesting," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "He said you badmouth Charlton when you're with me, and then turn around and talk trash about me to Charlton." "What?" Rue's face contorted, a mix of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. For a split second, her eyes widened in what looked like fear, but then that familiar smile returned, a bit forced this time. Well, she said, her tone suddenly nonchalant. "I guess the cat's out of the bag, huh?" "Rue, what on earth were you thinking?" I demanded, feeling a surge of anger and betrayal rise within me. "Isn't it obvious?" She retorted, her sweet demeanor completely gone now. Her voice had taken on a callous, almost a bored quality that sent chills down my spine. "I was trying to drive a wedge between you and Charlton," she continued, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "But now that I think about it, I probably don't need to bother anymore." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my heart racing as I braced myself for whatever bombshell she was about to drop. Rue laughed then, a sound that was more triumphant than joy. It was the laugh of someone who thought they'd won, and it made my blood run cold. "I've had Charlton's baby," she announced, her eyes glittering with malice. "So why don't you just divorce him and get out of our way, you old hag?" Her smile was downright demonic as she stared me down, clearly relishing my shock and pain. Then, as if to twist the knife further, she pulled out a photograph and thrust it in my face. "This is my son," she declared proudly. "When did you? How?" I stammered, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly too weak to support me. This was Rue's true nature, finally revealed in all its ugly glory. I had been so foolish, so trusting. I'd confided in her about my frustrations with Charlton, never realizing she was using every word against me, inching her way closer to my husband all the while. Charlton says he's going to make our son the heir to the company, Rue continued, twisting the knife even deeper. He told me he's not interested in any of the children he had with you. I see, I replied, my tone suddenly as cold and formal as hers. There was no point in pretending anymore, no reason to maintain the facade of friendship. So what do you plan to do now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Are you seriously asking me that? God, you really are an idiot, aren't you? It's obvious, isn't it? I'm going to kick you out and become Charlton's wife. The real one, not just some placeholder like you've been. She sneered. Her eyes took on a dreamy quality as she spoke, clearly lost in her vision of the future. So that had been her endgame all along. I should have seen it coming, but somehow, the reality of it still felt like a knife through my heart. I forced myself to smile, swallowing back the bile that had risen in my throat. I understand, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Once the words were out, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. There was no more confusion, no more indecision. I knew exactly what I had to do. Here, divorce papers. I'll be taking Amadeus with me, I said, reaching into a nearby drawer and pulling out a stack of papers. I handed the documents to Rue, who looked momentarily stunned. The truth was, I'd been considering divorce for a long time now. In a way, this was almost perfect timing. Rue stared at the papers in her hands, clearly caught off guard by my quick action. But when she regained her composure, her face twisted into a scowl. What? No, you need to take all of them with you, she snapped. I don't think so, I replied, shaking my head firmly. Because these children. I trailed off, realizing this was no joking matter. I'd been taking care of them out of the kindness of my heart all these years, but if I was leaving Charlton, things were different now. Besides, if Rue was so eager to be the new Mrs. Charlton, she should probably know the truth. Excuse me for a moment, I said, turning away from her confused glare. What now? I took out my smartphone and called someone. Hello, Esme. Oh, madam? I heard a sultry woman's voice from the other end of the line. I explained the situation to her. Our Charlton has had a child with a new mistress. So I've finally had enough of Charlton and decided to leave him. You and the new mistress can decide who will be the legitimate wife. What are you talking about, you? Rue was furious. I'm the one who had his child, so of course I'll be the legitimate wife. Who are you calling? By that logic, Esme, who has had 4 of Charlton's children, would be more suitable as the legitimate wife, wouldn't she? I tilted my head. In contrast, Rue looked horrified and stepped back. 4 children! Yes. Amadeus is my child, but the 4 older ones are Esme's. Esme has been aiming for the position of legitimate wife for a long time. I introduced her and then pointed the smartphone at Rue. Esme's voice came through the speaker. Honestly, I thought my turn would never come. I've turned 30 while waiting. Coincidentally, Esme and I were the same age. However, unlike me, Esme was a tall beauty. All her children looked like Charlton, so they didn't resemble her at all. Even so, Esme was the prime candidate among all the mistresses. Before I married Charlton, he was already involved with Esme and had children with her. But before the marriage talks between Charlton and Esme could proceed, his parents took a liking to me. What an interference. Esme spoke with a tone of exasperation. So, if the madam is going to divorce, this time I will become Charlton's wife. How dare you come out of nowhere and act high and mighty? Rue retorted, unwilling to back down. He said our child would be his heir. He told me the same thing every time I had a son. It's Charlton's favorite line. But in truth, I don't think he has any plans at all. What do you mean by that? He hasn't decided who will be his heir. There was a certain conviction in Esme's words. It was probably a statement backed by her own experiences. And indeed, I had similar experiences myself. Charlton always said that Amadeus would be his successor and disciplined him harshly every day, but it was nothing more than a way to vent his stress. By being strict with his children, he indulged in the image of a good father who cared about their future. That's all? Is that the end of the conversation? Yes. I nodded, and Esme yawned. Then I'm going to sleep. I have work tonight. Good night. I hope everything turns out well. Acting all smug, Esme muttered before ending the call. Rue held her head in her hands. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not joking. Charlton had suddenly appeared at the entrance of the room. Charlton! Rue's face lit up. To Rue, Charlton was her ally. After all, she depended entirely on Charlton for her livelihood. However, Charlton betrayed Rue's expectations. With a stern expression, he rebuked her. Rue! How dare you act on your own? But Charlton, you said our child would be your heir. That doesn't mean I ever said I would make you my wife. No way. Rue looked shocked and collapsed to the floor. Charlton glanced at her briefly before turning back to me. His previously haughty demeanor was gone, replaced by a pitiful tone as he pleaded. Susan, please reconsider. I'll work harder than ever, so don't abandon me. What do you mean? Rue blinked in confusion. Charlton continued to beg, taking my hand. Seeing no reaction from me, he fell to his knees. Charlton! Please, I'm begging you. No, I said with a smile. I've made up my mind. I'm divorcing you. You can choose your next wife as you please. Exactly. Rue chimed in, echoing my words. Why are you so fixated on her? You always spoke ill of her. You don't understand anything. Charlton said, on the verge of tears. Our company grew thanks to her parents. The world thinks it's all my doing, but that's not the truth. Huh? Rue's face was a picture of disbelief. No wonder. She had approached Charlton, believing in his business acumen. It was time for me to reveal the truth. My parents are executives in a globally influential company. They used their influence to sing Charlton's praises far and wide. That garnered trust and attention from other businesses, allowing him to rise to his current position. No way. Rue looked as if the life had been sucked out of her. To her, this truth was unbearably harsh. Charlton clung to me, affirming my words. If your parents abandon me, I'll be drowning in debt again. Debt? Rue screamed. What do you mean, Charlton? Charlton averted his eyes, clearly embarrassed. I took over, explaining instead. He used to be swamped in debt because his business wasn't going well. He acted as if everything was fine in front of his mistresses, but he was in even more financial trouble due to all the gifts and support he provided them. So, Charlton's success wasn't due to his skills, but because of your parents' influence? Exactly. I nodded with a smile. I looked at the divorce papers once again. I've already signed. If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll tell my parents about how you've been treating me.
Please, don't do that.
Charlton's voice was desperate. It seemed he was aware that his treatment of me had been unfair. Knowing this and still behaving that way, I gently squeezed Charlton's hand. He looked up, relief flooding his face. But then I let go of his hand. And, still smiling, firmly declared, "Goodbye, Charlton." I said.
Susan, wait! Susan!
He tried to cling to me again, but I sidestepped him and headed for the door. Just before leaving, I turned back. "I'm taking Amadeus with me. You can have the other children."
Take them all!
Rue cried out in desperation, tears streaming down her face.
Why? I thought everything was going so well. How could it end like this? It's your fault.
Charlton said, his voice breaking.
It's all your fault. You ruined everything. How are you going to fix this?
Ignoring Charlton's desperate cries, I walked out of the room. I decided to take Amadeus and return to my parents' home. Naturally, I had already explained everything to them.
So Charlton was that kind of man.
My mother, Erlene, said with a deep sigh. My father, Garrett, clenched his fists in anger.
You were right to leave him. I'm ashamed I didn't see it. I'm sorry, Susan.
It's okay, I replied with a slight smile. Despite the terrible marriage, there was one thing. I was grateful to Charlton for Amadeus.
Amadeus, you must have had a tough time too. From now on, we are your family, Erlene said gently. Welcome home.
Thank you, Amadeus replied nervously. My parents' home is far from the city. A grand but old mansion with a large, sturdy estate behind it. To me, it was a place full of nostalgic memories. I used to climb the trees in the garden and get scolded by my father. But for Amadeus, who had only ever known our house and school, this was his first time here. It was no wonder he felt nervous.
Will I never see Dad again?
He asked.
That's right, I replied. Dad and Mom have said goodbye. So, you won't see him anymore.
I thought Amadeus was expressing his sadness at not being able to see Charlton. But at the next moment, Amadeus shouted with joy.
Great! I won't have to be scolded by Dad or see Mom being bullied anymore. Amadeus, that's right. You don't have to see your mean dad anymore.
Saying this, I hugged Amadeus. Returning to the room I once used, I felt a strange emotion. It was preserved exactly as it had been during my time here, impeccably clean. There wasn't a speck of dust on the desk. My mother must have cleaned it every day. I'm grateful for that. I sat down in the chair and silently stroked the desk for a while. At that moment, my smartphone vibrated with an incoming call. It was from Charlton.
What is it? Susan! What did you tell Garrett?
His voice was panicked. I responded calmly.
I told him the truth. How you acted at home, how uncooperative and selfish you were with housework, and how cold you were. How could you do this to me?
Charlton groaned.
The clients Garrett introduced are all saying they want to stop doing business with us. That must be tough.
I pretended to sympathize with Charlton as if it were someone else's problem. Garrett was angry.
He must have contacted his acquaintances with that energy. I worked hard. Harder than you. I have better academic credentials and more work history than you. And yet, I lost everything in an instant.
Well, I was exasperated by Charlton's childish complaints. I understood that his pride lay in his academic achievements and daily hard work. Understanding that, I couldn't help but say,
"If you are truly exceptional, the clients wouldn't turn their backs on you just because of Garrett's words."
"What did you say?" Charlton's voice turned harsh. It was only natural since his pride had been damaged. However, Charlton couldn't respond to my words. He must have realized it himself. Even so, he was trying to shift the blame onto me. Because he was this kind of person, no one acknowledged him, and he could only strut around thanks to the nepotism from relatives. Now that he had lost that nepotism, there was no one left to deal with the former Charlton. "Susan, you
praise yourself, but never acknowledge those around you. You only associated with people who flattered you and couldn't see through their true feelings. Don't you understand? This is the outcome you brought upon yourself."
I spoke in a calm, admonishing tone. If Charlton had acknowledged Amadeus even a little, he wouldn't have been hated so much by him. I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce either. That way, no one would have been unhappy.
You made yourself unhappy. If you are an adult, especially if you pride yourself on being an outstanding person, you must take responsibility.
Responsibility.
Yes.
I looked up at the ceiling as I spoke. It was about time I felt the futility of continuing this conversation with Charlton.
You need to maintain the company on your own. You have the duty to guarantee your employees' livelihoods, satisfy your mistresses, and raise your children as you have been doing.
With that, I hung up the call. Charlton called several more times, but I didn't answer. What happened to the former Charlton after that? He probably thought he was making an effort, but his efforts didn't yield any results. It was the exact situation where his own principle applied, the one he used when he scolded Amadeus over his test scores. If there are no results, it doesn't count as effort, that was it. A bitter smile crept across my lips. Charlton's downfall was like a scene from a painting. His clients turned away, and he couldn't even pay his employees properly. As a result, he lost the trust of his employees and was soon ousted from his position as president. His mistresses also left him. It seems Esme stayed with him until the end, but that was for the sake of her children. Ultimately, she took her children and left Charlton.
So you were just that kind of person after all. Esme! Please wait! If you leave me too, I'll truly be alone.
Charlton had apparently pleaded desperately. Esme, who later told me this, shrugged and said,
"I've always been alone. My children were taken from me, and I spent years by myself."
Esme. Leaving the helpless Charlton behind, Esme moved to another town. The day before her move, she visited me.
Rue is having a hard time too. She's been abandoned with her child.
About Rue, I said with a sigh. She came to my house a few days ago.
What?
Esme's eyes widened in surprise.
She said she's barely managing to live on her own and asked if I could take her child.
Of course, I refused. There's no way such irresponsibility could be allowed.
That's right.
Esme nodded with a troubled expression.
I couldn't spend time with my children because he took them away from me, but now my life feels complete. It's tough, but they're my own children.
After saying this, Esme bowed her head.
Susan, thank you for raising my sons all this time.
No. I shook my head. I'm the one who should apologize. I took away your place. I'm sorry.
Susan.
Esme and I naturally shook hands. A few days after that farewell, Rue came to visit again. Please, take in this child. I can't raise them on my own.
Then why did you become a mother?
I said, exasperated. Rue, enraged, shouted.
It's your fault. If you hadn't spread those unnecessary rumors, I would have lived a comfortable life as the president's wife.
Is that so? I tilted my head. Rue was an optimist. But I had a different image of her in my mind.
He's not the kind of man who values his wife. Do you think he would have cherished you after marriage? That.
Rue hesitated, unable to find words to argue. Then suddenly, she started to tear up.
I've never had a job, so no one will hire me. There's no choice then.
I proposed an alternative.
I will take in your child. Really? But you will never see them again. I will raise them as my own child. Is that acceptable? Wait, what? Hold on a second.
Rue looked at me, visibly shaken.
You can't raise the child, can you? But I'm the mother. But you don't have the ability to raise a child.
I said it firmly.
You might have given birth to the child, but you're not a mother. You're just complaining about your own unhappiness without caring about the child.
A person like that isn't a mother at all. Moreover, Rue was trying to use her son as an excuse to remarry. I couldn't leave the baby with someone who saw their child as a bargaining chip.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to try and raise the child yourself? Or, please forgive me.
Rue collapsed on the spot, crying.
I'll do anything. Just don't take my child away from me. So, you'll raise him yourself?
I looked down at the sobbing Rue and crossed my arms.
Let this be a lesson to you. Live your life properly from now on. Yes.
Rue left in tears. I don't know what happened to her after that. I lived with Amadeus at my parents' house. For a while, I helped my mom with the housework, but then one day, Garrett brought up something unexpected. Our subsidiary is hiring. Would you like to work there?
Me?
I felt uncertain if I could handle it, but I was more excited than anything else. I wanted to venture out into the world, and I nodded at my father's suggestion. There were various experiences in the outside world. I made friends with some of my colleagues, and others distanced themselves from me because of my background. Either way, it was a stimulating experience compared to my days spent at home as a housewife.
Mom, you seem really happy these days. Do I?
I tilted my head.
Yeah, you looked so miserable when you were with Dad. But now, you seem so happy. Maybe you're right.
I nodded gently. Living out in society isn't easy. But there's a sense of fulfillment in my work, and there are people who acknowledge my efforts. And then, when I get home, Amadeus is there. Hey, Mom.
What's up?
I got 85 on my test again. Amadeus said this sadly, looking downcast, but I couldn't help but smile. I hugged Amadeus and said,
I used to get 60 on my tests all the time. Really? Yes, really. But I still grew up just fine, and I don't think I'm any less of a person than your dad.
I looked into Amadeus's eyes as I said this.
What do you think? Mom, you're amazing. You're my proud and wonderful mom.
Amadeus smiled too. We could laugh together, mother and child. That was a happiness we never had in that house. It's a joy we now cherish deeply. Amadeus and I have been freed from the storm that was Charlton.
I found my wallet inside your purse. You thief!
Magdalene, my sister-in-law, shouted, glaring at me as she rummaged through her purse. This incident occurred during a family dinner at my fiancé's parents' house, shortly after we had set a date for our wedding. Among the gathered family members was Magdalene, whom I had always found difficult to deal with. When we visited my fiancé's family to announce our engagement, Magdalene happened to be there and had set her sights on me. Since then, she frequently invited me out to eat, saying things like,
"I don't have any change on me today, could you spot me?"
or,
"I forgot my wallet, lend me some money, will you?"
not once had she ever paid for her own meal. Moreover, she never paid back the money I had lent her. At first, I genuinely wanted to get along with her. However, as my distrust grew day by day, I tried to avoid interacting with her as much as possible, but, accused of being a thief in front of my fiancé and relatives, my mind went blank. The wallet Magdalene was holding was undoubtedly hers, and I swore I had never stolen it.
Magdalene, please calm down for a moment.
What? Are you going to make excuses?
I'll make sure to claim a hefty settlement from you for stealing my wallet, so be prepared,"
she shouted excitedly, not even giving me a chance to interject. Seeing her like that, I regained my composure and couldn't help but let out a chuckle. The relatives also burst into laughter, leaving her stunned by the scene.
"What's so funny?"
As she spat out those words, her face turning bright red, I decided to tell her the truth.
"I can't help but laugh. You've said some pretty terrible things, Magdalene."
My name is Anastasia. I'm a 28-year-old company employee who recently got engaged to my longtime boyfriend. My fiancé, Houston, is 2 years older than me and my supervisor at work. Houston had always looked out for me since I joined the company. My first impression of him was that he was a reliable boss, easygoing and sincerely listening to his subordinates. As we spent every day together, we became close enough to discuss not only work but also our personal lives, and before we knew it, we developed special feelings for each other. Being close in age and having many common interests may have been one of the reasons. After a few years of a smooth office romance, we decided to get married and agreed to first inform our respective parents. When we visited my family home first, my parents and sister wholeheartedly congratulated us. My sister Andy is 7 years older than me, already married, and lives near our family home with her husband and 2 children. Due to an illness she's had since childhood, she currently works from home as a translator. Upon hearing that I was coming home, she apparently finished her work early to come and see me.
"Anastasia, my heartfelt congratulations. Houston, please take good care of my little sister,"
Andy said with a smile, making a sincere request to Houston. She had always doted on me since I was young, and I adored my kind and intelligent sister Andy. On the way home after greeting my family, Houston said, "You have a wonderful sister," which made me as happy as if he had complimented me directly.
"You have a sister too, right, Houston? I'm really looking forward to meeting her soon,"
I replied, but Houston's expression turned somewhat complicated for some reason.
"I'm glad to hear you say that. But the thing is, my sister can be a bit self-centered and pretentious, so I'm worried she might cause trouble for you, Anastasia,"
Houston answered reluctantly. It seemed he didn't really want me to meet Magdalene. As for me, I wanted to get along with her since she would be my sister-in-law. But at that time, I couldn't have imagined that this person named Magdalene would become a source of constant headaches. Later, when we visited Houston's family home, his parents greeted us at the door.
"Anastasia, it's been a while. It's so nice of you to come."
My future mother-in-law Albertine welcomed me in a relaxed tone, while my future father-in-law Abraham gave me a gentle smile. I had only spoken with Houston's parents a few times at their doorstep, but our relationship was good. However, this was my first time entering their house, so I was nervous about announcing our engagement and meeting Magdalene for the first time. As it turned out, Magdalene happened to be out at the moment. In contrast to my disappointment, Houston clearly had a relieved look on his face. I wondered if he really didn't want me to meet her that badly. With her in the back of my mind, the conversation flowed smoothly thanks to my future in-laws' kind personalities, and my nervousness quickly dissipated, leading to an enjoyable time. They were genuinely delighted about our marriage, and feeling reassured by their reaction, we began preparing to leave. Just as I was about to put on my shoes at the entrance while my future in-laws saw us off, the front door suddenly opened from the outside.
"I'm home,"
and a woman entered. Upon seeing her,
"Ah."
Houston let out a small gasp.
"Oh, Houston, what are you doing here? You're leaving already? Since I just got back, stay a little longer,"
she said. The woman blocking the doorway looked to be in her mid-30s, around the same age as my sister Andy. However, she wore heavier makeup and gave off a strong-willed impression. I immediately realized this was Houston's sister, Magdalene. According to what he had told me, she was divorced in the past and had no children with her ex-husband. "It's nice to meet you. I'm Anastasia, and I've been dating Houston. We recently decided to get married, so we came to give our greetings," I said, bowing my head to Magdalene, but the reply I received was a curt,
"Huh."
When I looked up, Magdalene was staring at me intently. Then, with a smirk, "Where did you meet Houston?" she asked.
"Hey, Magdalene, this is the first time you're meeting Anastasia. Don't start asking questions like that out of the blue,"
Houston said, exasperated, but she ignored him. "How much do you make? You're well-dressed, so you must be wealthy, right? Do you work at the same company as him?" And she continued to bombard me with more questions.
Well,"
I was at a loss for words, overwhelmed by her barrage of questions, when Houston intervened and scolded her.
"That's enough. Can't you see you're making Anastasia uncomfortable? We're leaving now, so please move out of the way."
He tried to separate me from her, but Magdalene glared at him as if to say he was interfering.
"What's the big deal? If you're getting married, we'll be sister-in-law, so I should be allowed to chat with her a bit." "Oh, I know, Anastasia, let's exchange contact information while we're at it."
I hesitated when Magdalene said that, pulling out her phone from her purse, but since we would be family in the future, I couldn't really refuse. In the end, I gave in to her forcefulness and shared my contact information, but I immediately regretted it, wondering if it was the right thing to do.
"Magdalene, don't cause too much trouble for Anastasia,"
as Albertine said, but Magdalene didn't seem to care at all and went inside the house. I finally understood why Houston's face had clouded over when Magdalene was mentioned the other day. Unlike her brother Houston, she seemed to be pushy and unwilling to listen to others. She was the complete opposite of Andy. I couldn't help but feel anxious about whether I'd be able to get along with her in the future. However, since we would be family, my desire to have a good relationship with her remained unchanged, so I resolved to reply politely whenever Magdalene contacted me. After exchanging contact information, I started receiving frequent emails from her. As we corresponded, we discovered that our workplaces were close to each other, and one day, Magdalene invited me to have lunch with her during our work break. Seeing no reason to refuse, I agreed, but on the day of our lunch, just as we finished eating and were about to pay the bill, Magdalene let out a small "oh," as if she had just realized something. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I'm sorry, Anastasia. I don't have any change on me right now. Could you spot me? I'll pay you back later," she said, looking inside her wallet without a hint of remorse. I found her behavior to be careless, but I thought it was just one lunch, so I covered for her as she had asked. However, on another day,
"Oh no, I forgot my wallet. Anastasia, could you pay for me instead?"
Even though she was the one who frequently invited me to lunch, she kept making excuses to have me pay for her share of the meal. When I asked for reimbursement later, she would brush it off, saying,
"The cost of lunch isn't that much, is it? Don't sweat the small stuff,"
and wouldn't take me seriously. Even though a single lunch wasn't a significant amount, she kept inviting me, so my financial burden gradually increased. In the end, even after several months, the money I had paid on her behalf never made its way back to me, and my distrust of her grew day by day. I realized that Magdalene was someone I should avoid as much as possible, and my desire to get along with her had completely disappeared. Recently, when she invited me to lunch, I would make up an excuse to decline and kept my email responses to a bare minimum. I tried to cut ties with her as much as possible, but one day after work, as Houston and I left the company together, someone immediately called out my name in a familiar voice. When I looked in the direction of the voice, I was shocked to see Magdalene standing there. She had been waiting for me to finish work.
Look at you two, leaving work together like a happy couple,
Magdalene said in a sarcastic tone, causing Houston to frown.
Magdalene, do you need something?
Houston asked, and she smiled sweetly.
Actually, I have plans to have dinner with friends today, but I'm a little short on cash. Anastasia, could you lend me some money?
She said to me. Her behavior, as if she had gotten a taste for it, made me feel genuinely disgusted.
I'm sorry, but no. You still haven't paid back the money I lent you before.
The moment I firmly refused, she became disgruntled.
How cold of you! We're family, aren't we? When it comes to family, lending and borrowing money should be no big deal. Besides, you make more money than I do,
she said shamelessly, leaving me astonished. Besides, I had never once discussed my salary with her, but she had probably looked into it since Houston and I worked at the same company. Also, I wanted to argue that I didn't recall becoming part of her family yet, but before I could open my mouth, Houston scolded her.
Even if we're family, you shouldn't be borrowing money like this. Before going out to dinner, you should pay back the money you borrowed from Anastasia first. If you can't return it right now, then just go home for today. Now wait a minute, Houston, who do you think you're talking to like that? I'm your sister. Are you really going to take some other woman's side over your own sister?
Magdalene glared at me while calling me an outsider, even though she had just referred to us as family. Furthermore, she started spouting off some nonsense that I couldn't make any sense of, saying,
Besides, in this day and age, women need to have their own money too. Do you understand? If you can't lend me money, it's like broadcasting that you're poor.
Houston seemed to have lost the energy to be angry and was utterly exasperated.
You're not making any sense, Magdalene. Anastasia, let's go. Don't pay any mind to what she says.
We had no desire to say anything more to her, so we decided to leave the scene, pretending not to know her. Our colleagues leaving work were glancing our way as they passed by, making us the center of attention.
Hey, wait a minute, don't you dare leave,
she shouted from behind us, but we didn't look back. Even after that, I occasionally received messages from her, but I was busy preparing for the wedding, so I kept my responses brief and non-committal. Of course, I turned down her invitations to meals, and I hadn't seen her since she ambushed me in front of the company. Amidst all this, we successfully set a date for the wedding, and a dinner party was arranged for both families to gather. The location was my fiancé's family home. Shortly after Houston and I arrived at his parents' house, my parents and Andy arrived as well. Magdalene was present at the dinner, but while she greeted me, she didn't say anything to me directly, which was unexpectedly mature of her. While her attitude felt eerie, the table was filled with lavish dishes, and the atmosphere was one of celebration. The dinner party ended on a pleasant note, with everyone chatting and enjoying themselves, when suddenly Magdalene, who had just returned from the restroom, started shouting,
What? It's gone! It's gone! Where's my wallet?
Apparently, the wallet that was supposed to be in her purse had disappeared.
Calm down a bit. Are you sure you didn't just leave it in your room?
Albertine tried to appease her, but she didn't seem to hear her at all.
I'm positive I put it in my bag. That's it, I get it now. You stole it, didn't you?
She said, looking at me, then grabbed my bag that was placed near me and started rummaging through it. Then, with a look of shock on her face, she pulled out a wallet from my bag. It was her wallet, which I had seen several times before.
See, I told you! My wallet was in your purse.
Magdalene shouted in a strangely triumphant tone and continued to confront me.
You stole it while I was in the restroom, didn't you? Acting all innocent, but you're a terrible woman. I'm against someone like you becoming my brother's wife.
Magdalene, please calm down for a moment.
Are you going to make excuses? What you did is theft. I'm going to sue you for damages, so be prepared.
Without giving me a chance to interject, she shouted excitedly. However, unable to bear it any longer, I let out a chuckle.
Ha 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 ha.
As I started laughing, my parents and Houston also burst into laughter. Faced with this scene, she was stunned at first, but soon her face turned bright red, and she became angry.
What's so funny? I can't help but laugh. You've said some pretty outrageous things, Magdalene. Huh?
The next person to speak to her, who seemed unable to comprehend the situation, was my sister Andy, who was sitting next to me. That purse isn't Anastasia's. It's mine. The moment she heard those words, Magdalene's expression froze.
What?
Her face was covered in cold sweat. I asked, with a hint of confirmation.
There's no way Andy could steal your wallet, right?
It seemed Magdalene had indeed been waiting for an opportunity to pick a fight with me. Anticipating that she might try something, I hadn't brought a purse to today's dinner party. The purse next to me belonged to my sister, and moreover, my sister couldn't possibly pretend to steal someone's wallet. Such a thing was absolutely impossible. Because my sister had been unable to move her legs since childhood due to an illness and used a wheelchair to get around. She couldn't stand up or walk on her own. My future in-laws and Magdalene had seen my sister arrive at the dinner party in a wheelchair. And my sister hadn't moved from her current seat since the dinner party began, engaging in friendly conversation with our parents and future in-laws. Most likely, it was Magdalene herself who had put the wallet in my sister's purse. The question was, when did Magdalene manage to sneak the wallet in without us noticing?
Magdalene, you came near us to greet me and my parents before we started eating, right? At that time, I'm pretty sure you were sitting in a way that hid my purse behind your back. I felt something was off about your behavior. Isn't that when you slipped the wallet in?
Andy's calm words resolved my question. Unable to immediately answer the question, Magdalene's eyes darted around nervously. Her reaction was as good as admitting it was true. Cornered with no way to talk herself out of it, Magdalene let out a groan.
Ugh.
She continued to admonish her in a calm tone.
I heard about your personality from Anastasia. We're almost the same age, so why would you go to such lengths to harass her? Please don't hurt my precious Anastasia any further.
Hearing these words, I finally realized that my sister was angry. My sister has a gentle personality, but ever since we were young, when she gets angry, her tone becomes quiet and reproachful, which is quite frightening. As Magdalene fumbled for words, unable to make excuses after being lectured, my future mother-in-law scolded her.
Magdalene, what do you think you're doing? Calling Anastasia a thief is beyond shameful.
This is just pathetic. We raised Houston equally, so where did we go wrong in raising you?
Anastasia, I apologize for my daughter's actions.
My future father-in-law Abraham bowed his head to me. However, even seeing her parents apologize, unfortunately, it didn't seem to reach her heart. The next moment, Magdalene stood up with force and glared at me with a terrifying expression.
What? You're all ganging up on me now? I was against you and Houston's marriage from the beginning. I was hoping you'd be humiliated and break up today, but you just had to ruin it.
She started lashing out irrationally at this point, leaving me dumbfounded and speechless. But Houston, upon learning Magdalene's true feelings, flew into a rage.
Don't screw with me,
he shouted, causing her to flinch.
Listening quietly until now, I see you were trying to ruin our relationship after all. I can't take it anymore, so I'm going to say it all right here. What? Wait a minute, what are you going to say?
She hurriedly tried to stop him, but Houston, whose patience had run out, wouldn't be stopped. He exposed all of Magdalene's misdeeds up until now, like making me cover lunch expenses and never paying me back, and ambushing us in front of our company to beg for money. Furthermore, according to Houston, Magdalene had been secretly bad-mouthing me to Houston, trying to break us up by any means necessary.
Who would believe such words? Anastasia has been working hard since she joined the company, and I know better than anyone that she has a serious and kind personality. Even if we're family, there are things you should and shouldn't say.
He didn't go into detail about what kind of bad-mouthing Magdalene had done. But from how intensely he was seething, I could imagine she had spread some pretty terrible rumors. I had no idea something like that happened. When I expressed my surprise at hearing this for the first time, his face turned regretful. I'm sorry. I kept quiet because I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily, Anastasia. No matter what she says, I believe in you. Hearing him say that in a serious tone, I felt my eyes well up with tears. I wiped the tears that had formed and turned to face Magdalene.
Magdalene, I've decided to stand by Houston no matter what. So please take this opportunity to properly let go of your little brother.
At my words, Magdalene's face flushed red, perhaps from embarrassment.
Shut up! You better remember this,
she said before storming out of her parents' house. Enveloped in a sense of relief after the storm had passed, I let out a deep sigh. No matter what kind of harassment she tried from now on, I wasn't afraid of anything. This incident had only deepened my love for Houston. I vowed in my heart to continue believing in him and walking together with him. A few days later, the money I had covered for Magdalene's lunches was returned to me through my future in-laws. Apparently, they had persuaded Magdalene to prepare the money she had borrowed from me. And then, it seems Magdalene's ex-husband had contacted her parents' home. The cause of their divorce was her extravagant spending, and she had even gone as far as to use up their living expenses. As a result, her ex-husband had demanded compensation from her in the divorce proceedings. While she had told her parents that the payments were already settled, it appears there was still a substantial amount remaining. It came to light through the ex-husband's contact that the repayments had recently fallen behind. Upon learning this, her parents had finally had enough of Magdalene and cut ties with her. In addition to her misdeeds against us, it seems she had a prior history of stealing money from her family. It turns out that aside from the compensation, Magdalene had debts from splurging on brand name items and frequenting host clubs. According to what Houston told me, Magdalene had been heavily involved in nightclubs since her 20s, and her parents had reprimanded her numerous times. In the end, when she couldn't make ends meet, she even embezzled money from her workplace, which is just unbelievable. That was also found out by her company, and she was recently fired. Some time later, I received a call from Magdalene, who had been kicked out of her parents' home and lost her job. I have no one else to turn to but you, Anastasia. Please, just lend me a little money. She pleaded in a tearful voice, but of course, I refused.
Isn't that a bit too convenient for you now? Please pay back the compensation and debts by earnestly working and earning your own money. I have no intention of being involved with you anymore. What? Aren't we family? Let's get along from now on. I wanted to get along with you at first too. But I have no desire to become family with someone who spends money recklessly and doesn't think what they've done is wrong at all.
After I said that, she was still shouting something, but I hung up the phone without engaging. After that, Magdalene apparently started living in poverty in an apartment she could afford with her meager savings. However, hounded by her debts, she soon had to vacate the apartment, and now I don't know where or how she's living. Houston also said he would never get involved with her again. A month passed, and we successfully held our wedding without Magdalene present. The happy time blessed by many people is a precious, once-in-a-lifetime memory that I cherish even now. After getting married, we began living in the new home we had prepared beforehand, and soon after, I discovered I was pregnant. Eagerly awaiting the birth of the child growing in my womb, I spend fulfilling days together with Houston. I can only hope to continue living happy days together with our newly born family from here on out.
She threw herself on me, and I just couldn't say no. I guess I'm just that popular. But man, young women are the best. Never thought she'd get pregnant so quickly though, but hey, we're still family, right? Not like I plan on taking her away from my son. But we'll probably end up living together, so I'm looking forward to what's lying ahead.
It took a moment to understand the words of Michael, my husband, talking on the phone with a friend. I didn't know what it was about, but the pale face of our son, Paul, in front of me gave it all away.
What? You got to be kidding me. Does this mean what I think it means?
Paul muttered, without seeking confirmation from anyone. I was left speechless by his words. But we couldn't continue living without knowing the truth. After learning everything, Paul plotted his revenge. I decided to fully support him in sending Michael straight to hell. I'm Sophia. Currently 46 years old. Living with my husband Michael, our eldest son Paul, and our daughter Lily, it's the four of us. I'm currently working part-time in an administrative role at a local company. I've been working for this company since graduating high school, took a break for childbirth and raising my kids, but started working again once the kids didn't need as much attention. I have good relationships at work and a happy family life. It's a perfectly ordinary life, but I've come to feel it's the happiest thing at my age. If there's one complaint in my life, it would be about my husband, Michael. Michael is 50 this year. Unlike me, he's an active type who seeks excitement, always saying, "I'd suffocate staying at home all the time." He's always loved going out and has many hobbies. When the kids were little, he'd take them fishing, camping, hiking, and we even played golf together. Michael, always with the family, seemed like the ideal dad from the outside, and was even envied by others. But what's seen from the outside isn't everything. While curious, Michael also gets bored very easily. He's the type who starts by looking the part at anything he does. Expensive fishing rods, camping gear, golf equipment. Every new hobby meant spending hundreds of dollars on gear, only to stop using them after a few times. And they would never be used again.
Dad, I want to go fishing again. Dad, I want to go camping.
Even if the kids begged, once he got bored, he wouldn't listen to their requests.
What? I'm already done with that stuff.
With those words, it was over. He might have seemed like a good dad to others, but Michael was just doing what he wanted. The kids were not really joining him. He was dragging all of us along. Eventually, the kids realized that too.
All right, this summer vacation, let's all go get our diving license.
Eventually, when Michael would suggest something, no thanks. You'll just quit when it gets fun.
And getting gear for all four of us costs money, especially when we'll just stop using it soon anyway.
That's why we stopped going along with his suggestions. I think the kids have a point. I feel the same way. But Michael just gets mad at them. What's the deal?
I thought it'd be nice for us all to do something together.
He complains in such a way that you can't tell who's supposed to be the adult. When Lily, our youngest, became a middle schooler, Michael truly stopped getting any attention from the kids. But that didn't mean Michael calmed down. What he started next was gambling. Compared to his past hobbies, starting gambling didn't require much upfront money. And he'd probably get bored of it soon anyway. If he went alone on his days off without dragging the kids along, I actually found it convenient. I didn't know how long this new hobby would last, but I decided to just watch over it.
Sophia, listen, I won $1,000 today. Aren't I amazing?
Luckily, Michael never suffered major losses. Sometimes he'd win $1,000, other times $300, or even $50. The amounts varied, but it seemed he mostly won.
$1,000? That's incredible. Makes working feel stupid, right?
He'd joke about his hobby like that. But after getting hooked on gambling for about 6 months, Michael stopped talking about winning. Lately, I haven't heard about any wins. Not going well? If I asked, he'd brag, of course not. I'm a genius. I keep winning every time I go. It's just a hassle to report it. Plus, it's my pocket money. Well, I had my concerns, but he was serious about his job. As long as he was using his own spending money and kept it within reason, there wasn't much I could say. It's not like I wasn't worried, but nothing has lasted a year with him. I thought he'd get bored soon enough. However, contrary to my expectations, Michael didn't stop gambling. He even made friends, continuing to indulge in gambling every weekend a year later. As I was growing frustrated with such Michael, one day, something happened while I was shopping at the supermarket. When I tried to pay with the card for our living expenses, the clerk told me, "I'm sorry, but the payment isn't going through." Thinking the magnetic strip was damaged, I quickly pulled out my own card. "Sorry, can we use this one instead?" And paid without issue. The card for living expenses was a family card issued in Michael's name, with withdrawals from his account. So, I had to talk to him about it that night.
The card didn't work at the supermarket today. Maybe the magnetic strip's bad? Can you handle the reissuing?
I handed the card to Michael. But days passed without any action from Michael. Suspecting something, I called the company, but they said they couldn't discuss it with anyone but Michael. While waiting for the reissue using my own card, I noticed a letter from the card company. Thinking Michael had taken care of it without telling me, I opened it, assuming it was the new card, without checking with Michael. But the contents of the letter shocked me.
Couldn't withdraw from the account? What does that mean?
It was a demand letter asking for a deposit into the account. The account was where Michael's salary was supposed to go. It was unthinkable that there wouldn't be enough for a withdrawal. I rushed to the bank to check the balance. To my horror, there was only $300 left. There were multiple withdrawals from the ATM using the card. No doubt about it. It was Michael's doing. Suppressing the rage that threatened to overwhelm me, I returned home. And that day, when Michael came home, I confronted him right away.
What were you thinking? What's this all of a sudden? Don't play dumb. There's hardly any balance left. How are we supposed to get by this month?
Michael laughed it off as if to dodge the question.
Just lost a bit, so I borrowed some. It's not like I touched the savings, so it shouldn't matter much, right?
And he had the nerve to say it so nonchalantly. I was furious with Michael's carefree attitude. It wasn't that the card was demagnetized. It was just disabled, which is why it couldn't be used. Michael knew that, so he didn't bother to get it reissued. Even if he had told me honestly, it wouldn't have been forgivable, but keeping silent and then trying to cover it up made me feel betrayed. Please, no more gambling. Saying that seemed to sour Michael's mood even further.
What's the big deal? I've been losing a bit these past few months, but overall, I'm still ahead, aren't I?
Quit while you're ahead then. He responded with a sullen face and childish retort, and I scolded him again. After that, Michael was unbearable.
What a boring family. Can't even do what I enjoy.
Muttering that, he treated me, who had banned gambling, like an enemy. But I couldn't just sit around and wait until the financial issues affected our lives. The kids were still students. Their education costs money. The relationship between us spouses deteriorated, and Michael probably got bored with our marriage, but divorce wasn't an easy option. Wanting to maintain a harmonious family until the kids were grown, I spent my days trying to appease Michael. Then a happy event occurred in our family. Paul, who had graduated high school and was working, got a girlfriend and introduced her to me. Her name is Mia. She's the same age as Paul, moved from the countryside to work here, and met him through a friend at work. It felt like a fresh breeze had blown into our family, and I welcomed Mia warmly. "Your mom's cooking is so delicious." Mia was a lovely girl. She always complimented our meals when we ate together. She even went cafe hopping with Lily, quickly becoming part of our family. Mia also took great care of Michael, being his drinking buddy and listening to his stories, something only she did among us. Michael liked Mia too, saying, if Paul and Mia got married and she became my daughter-in-law, that'd be great. Of course, I was all for the idea. Paul and Mia were still 20 but seemed to be thinking seriously about their future. Later, they decided to marry when they turned 23.
Why wait until 23?
I was simply curious. Paul explained.
Getting married costs money. I want to give Mia the wedding she dreams of, so we thought we'd save up together until then.
I was impressed by his mature thoughts for someone his age. Of course, we had enough savings to afford a wedding for them. But Paul didn't want to rely on us. Instead, he wanted to be the one to support us. I was moved to tears by his sentiment, even though the wedding was still far off. As a sign that Mia had already become part of our family, we decided to refer to her not just as Paul's girlfriend but as his fiancée. However, some time later, Paul told us that Mia was pregnant. I was surprised by the sudden news, especially since they had planned to marry at 23.
Pregnant? I don't mind, considering what you two feel,
I said to Paul, but his expression remained clouded.
Is something wrong? It's just... Mia shouldn't be pregnant.
Paul muttered uncomfortably in response to my question. I was puzzled by his statement. Paul added, as if to drive the point home.
There's no way I could be the father. I was away on a business trip when she would have gotten pregnant.
Paul's anguished cry pierced my heart. Mia had an affair? But she didn't seem like that kind of person. Paul continued.
But Mia insists she hasn't cheated. I just don't know what to do.
Paul was in despair. Seeing Paul like this, I wanted to talk to Mia and asked Paul if he could arrange a conversation for us. I decided to keep Michael in the dark until things were clearer. Given the delicate nature of the issue, I doubted Michael's involvement would help. But the truth came out in an unexpected way. One evening, Michael was unusually late to dinner. "Paul, can you call Dad?" I was busy and asked Paul to fetch Michael. Paul went to call him, but neither returned for a while.
What's going on?
Leaving Lily to finish dinner preparations, I headed to the bedroom. There, I found Paul standing outside the bedroom, pale as a ghost. What happened? Paul gestured for silence, placing his finger over his lips, and as I approached the bedroom door, I could hear Michael's voice.
Well, this secures our future.
He seemed to be on the phone. Michael's phone conversation was likely with one of the dubious friends he'd met through gambling. I looked at Paul's face. If it was just a phone call, he could have simply come back and said, Dad was on the phone. But judging by his complexion, it was probably not just any call. That became clear with his next words.
She threw herself on me and I just couldn't say no. I guess I'm just that popular. But man, young women are the best. Never thought she'd get pregnant so quickly though, but hey, we're still family, right? Not like I plan on taking her away from my son. But we'll probably end up living together, so I'm looking forward to what's lying ahead.
At first, I didn't understand, but Paul's pale face made me realize the gravity of the situation.
What? You got to be kidding me. Does this mean what I think it means?
Paul muttered, not seeking confirmation from anyone. I was left speechless by his words. Afterward, I took Paul and left the house. I couldn't let Michael and Paul meet. Lily looked puzzled, but I asked her to eat with Michael, and we went straight to Mia's place. Paul. Mom. Mia greeted us with a worried face. It seemed the pregnancy had caused a conflict between them. Feeling the tense atmosphere, I spoke up. Mia, I want to hear the truth. Who is the father of the child in your stomach? Then Mia started to cry. She seemed hesitant, but after I promised I won't get mad, no matter what, she slowly began to talk. Actually, it's Paul's dad. Despite my promise not to get angry, I felt a deep rage upon hearing who was involved. On one hand, I couldn't believe what my husband had done, and on the other, how Mia had agreed to it. But I was wrong. I heard Paul is infertile. And if we are going to have children, he would want someone who's related by blood. So Paul's dad suggested that he should be the father, since it wouldn't change the fact that we're family. Both Paul and I were speechless upon hearing this. Of course, that was not true about Paul. Mia just kept crying. What a vile turn of events. Michael had seduced Mia, Paul's fiancée, under false pretenses. Mia was the primary victim in this situation. Any distrust I had towards Mia vanished immediately. It was clear she wasn't lying.
Because it's a delicate issue, we thought to keep it from Paul. Michael and I thought staying silent would keep everyone happy.
Hearing this, my anger towards Michael nearly exploded. Paul must have felt the same.
Unforgivable. That man alone, I will definitely send him down to hell.
I nodded in agreement with Paul's words and decided to fully support his plan to bring Michael down. But caring for Mia was our first priority. Both Paul and I apologized deeply to her. She told us not to worry about it, but this wasn't something an apology could fix. I think there's no fault in the child. But please, give me some time to think about what to do. Mia told us her thoughts. Of course, we respected her wishes and asked her to contact us immediately if she needed anything. With that, we left her place.
We're home.
Ah, you're late. Where were you?
Lily and I already ate.
When Paul and I returned home, Michael casually remarked as if nothing was wrong. Paul looked like he might attack Michael at any moment, but he restrained himself and put on a smile.
Just wanted to have a chat with Mom, you know. I felt sorry for you, being banned from gambling and all.
Paul said this with a smile as he approached Michael. Right? You understand, Paul? Can't live without a hobby. Well, I guess you're right. Paul got me thinking, and I've reconsidered. Just don't overspend, okay? Lily was the only one not in on our plan, so her indignation, what? Are you stupid, only encouraged Michael further. If the whole family suggested it, he'd surely be suspicious.
Well, it's 3 against 1. Give it up, Lily. Finally, gambling is back on.
As expected, Michael was overjoyed and headed out to gamble the very next day. During his absence, we explained everything to Lily. Predictably, Lily showed more disgust towards Michael than anyone.
Unbelievable! I can't stand that he's our dad. Mia deserves so much better,
Lily said, crying. And from that day on, Lily joined the plan. The plan was simple. just let Michael squander his money on gambling. Our family knows Michael's character better than anyone. He would surely start dipping into the living expenses quietly again. That's why I moved all the living expenses and savings to a different account. I thought it would take about 2 months before moving to the next phase of our plan, but Michael's spending was several times faster than expected. In just 3 weeks, he ran out of money and started tapping into the living expenses account, which quickly ran dry too.
What are you thinking? This is the second time, you know? With Lily's college fees coming up, what are you going to do?
I yelled at Michael. Michael pleaded desperately, I didn't think it would run out so quickly. I'll win it back soon, just lend me $200, no, $100 from the savings. Even though I anticipated this, my anger towards Michael, who had quickly spent all the money, was genuine, not just an act.
You haven't learned your lesson at all. What are you even thinking?
Tears of frustration and anger came to me, and even Michael seemed taken aback. Always thinking about yourself. I thought I could endure it until the kids were grown, but I can't take it anymore. I slammed the divorce papers down. Michael turned pale at the sight of them.
Aren't you overreacting? I was just kidding.
He tried to soothe me, but I had no sympathy for Michael.
Lily will be under my custody. This house is in your name, so I'll be leaving. Just calm down. It's just gambling. Just gambling? That's just the last straw. I despise everything about you.
Michael seemed truly remorseful this time. But that level of remorse was far from sufficient. The divorce between me and Michael was just the first step of our plan. Michael was stubborn to the end, but to that, Paul said,
Dad, you said we were a boring family that wouldn't let you do what you wanted, remember?
Now you can do whatever you want. You're free.
That's true, I guess.
Tricked by Paul's encouragement, Michael signed the divorce papers. Upon learning about the separate account for living expenses during the property division, Michael was furious, but I had only safeguarded our money. He had no reason to be angry.
That money will also be split in half in the distribution of property,
he said arrogantly.
You're getting the house. If that's the case, sell the house, and we'll split that money too. Of course, I'm going to sell all the fishing rods, camping equipment, and anything else that might be worth something. But it's only natural, isn't?
Michael was at a loss for words. He didn't want to sell the house and, despite having no plans to use them, didn't want to part with his fishing rods either. In the end, I was able to receive all the savings. With that money, Lily and I started living in an apartment. I'm an adult, so I'll stay here, Paul said, seemingly content, but that was just for show. He stayed in the house to report to us how Michael was progressively falling into ruin. Michael's descent into hell was slow, like descending a staircase. Whether it was the stress of the divorce or the freedom of no one nagging him about gambling, he began visiting the gambling dens daily. It had been only on weekends before, but now, losing and coming home after work became his routine. Hey Dad, welcome back. Paul would greet him as if nothing was amiss. I'm home.
What am I having for dinner?
Nothing.
I just got back too.
What are you eating then? This?
It's the stew Mom made.
Paul would flaunt the food I prepared for him right in front of Michael, who ended up eating instant noodles. Michael's envious gaze at Paul's food.
Give me a bite.
After a while, Michael would always say this, and Paul would refuse with, no way. This exchange continued daily. Then, about a month later, while eating instant noodles, Michael asked Paul, Paul, I'm sorry to ask,
but could you chip in for the house expenses? What? You know, utilities and stuff cost money.
Michael seemed solemn, but Paul quickly caught on.
Ran out of money, haven't you?
No, it's not like that. Michael avoided eye contact as he spoke. Paul stood up, looking exasperated.
I've been contributing monthly. You've used that up too, haven't you? What? I can't give any more money. If you're still asking for money, then I'll leave.
Indeed, Paul had been contributing financially since he started working. Even after we left, he continued to deposit money into the living expenses account. Right, I was wrong. You can stay. Michael desperately tried to keep Paul from leaving. But Paul laughed and said,
But you know, I used to contribute because Mom did all the housework. Now that I think about it, you don't do anything, and I'm the one doing all the housework, right? So, it's only natural for you to cover the utility bills, and I shouldn't have to contribute at all, should I?
At those words, Michael had nothing to say. The house remained clean thanks to Paul. It must be difficult for him to even look at Michael, the person he despises the most. I admire Paul's determination to decisively push Michael further down.
Yeah, you're right.
Michael nodded, flustered, but Paul added,
Well, I'm leaving anyway.
Paul played Michael perfectly, inflicting sure damage while leaving him disoriented. Michael tried to stop him, but Paul shrugged him off and left him behind. What followed was predictable. Neighbors, unaware that I had left, began to contact me frequently.
The house looks neglected. Are you away? Michael seems really worn down. Is everything all right?
From the messages, I could easily imagine the kind of life Michael was leading. Furthermore, there were reports of scary people are visiting. Should I call the police? I seriously wondered what was going on, but it seems he has borrowed money from a loan shark. That means he really must have no money left. As expected, I received a call from Michael.
Sophia, help me. You're the only one I can turn to now.
The only thing Michael was capable of doing was begging for money. I had no intention of helping such a person, but I decided to get in touch. I have something to discuss with you. I'll come to the house tomorrow. Michael responded, I'll be waiting, to my message. The next day, I headed to the house. With Paul, Lily, Mia, and a man. 5 of us went to the house.
Oh, everyone came along. I've been waiting.
When we rang the doorbell, Michael greeted us with an unsettlingly wide smile. However, his smile vanished upon seeing the man. May I ask who you are? The man introduced himself. Nice to meet you. I'm Smith, a lawyer. I'm here to discuss the damages they've all suffered.
Damages?
Yes. The infidelity against Sophia, defamation of Paul, and sexual assault against Mia.
What?
Hearing these words, Michael let out a strange noise and turned pale, breaking out in a cold sweat. Let's talk inside. Actually, something urgent came up. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you guys to leave now. Noticing our gaze, Michael seemed to finally grasp the situation. In the next moment, he tried to flee.
Don't run!
Paul caught him and said,
I know everything you did. Act like an adult and take responsibility.
Subdued by Paul, Michael shrank back. Then it was the lawyer's turn. Michael, unable to argue against Smith's words, just nodded, watched by us with disdain. It goes without saying for Mia. Claiming Paul is infertile and telling his fiancé is defamation that could ruin her life. Please reflect on your actions. We then collectively demanded $100,000 in compensation. Smith explained to Michael the breakdown and its amount.
I can't possibly pay that.
Michael pleaded to Smith and the others. That's when Lily said,
Can't you cover that by selling this house? We're going to make sure you pay.
Michael has no money left. He's even resorted to borrowing. Selling the house seemed his only option. Michael's wailing and apologies were repulsive. But forgiveness was out of the question. Disgusting. Lily looked at Michael with disdain, as if looking at trash, and Paul also showed his disgust.
Just pay up. And don't ever come near us again. If you can't do that, we're prepared to take legal action over what happened to Mia.
We left Michael crying alone in the cluttered, filthy house and went home. Eventually, Michael sold the house. He used the money to pay us and to repay the loan shark, as Smith informed us. But now he had no home and no money to rent an apartment. No one was willing to help him. Not even his gambling friends seemed close enough to lend a hand. He's been living in an internet cafe, subsisting on his advance salary from work. How long can such a life last? It seems like he might end up homeless if this continues. We thought Paul's plan had brought Michael down, but on reflection, Michael seemed to have brought himself down. He will likely fade away, forgotten by our family, and end his life alone and unnoticed. Mia and Paul got married.
The child is innocent. I can't let Mia suffer anymore,
Paul declared, accepting Mia's child as his own. The amount of internal struggle he must have faced to make that decision. Mia, Lily, and I all cried, but Paul was the only one smiling. Mia gave birth to a healthy girl. Doesn't she look like Mom? Lily was the first to say so, seeing the resemblance to me. And Paul looks like me. If the baby looks like me then, and so we had a DNA test and it revealed the child was indeed Paul's. It seemed there had been a mix-up with the due dates. Mia, Lily, and I cried. But Paul, who had been holding back, cried the most.
I'll make sure they're happy. Both Mia and this child.
Paul made that promise. His next plan was truly wonderful. And I intend to support it fully.
Stop being a baby just because you're pregnant.
John was clutching his glass on the table, about to throw it at me. I covered my stomach with my hands, trying to protect it, and closed my eyes. When I opened them, Harper was crouching in front of me. Harper was holding her head with her hands. Blood was seeping from her hands. Harper, lying on her side, was looking at me.
Sis, take this.
Harper handed me her smartphone. I nodded firmly and took it. This would be our weapon. I'm Mia, 29 years old. I quit my job due to my pregnancy and became a housewife. My husband John and I were colleagues at the same company and got married after a company romance. What brought us together was our mutual hobby of stock investing. Many people invest and save for a better life, but it's rare to find someone who considers it a hobby. We clicked because of our unusual hobby. After many niche dates, we felt secure in our future and decided to get married. After marriage, we lived in a modest apartment close to our workplace, but after discovering my pregnancy, we decided to move in with John's family. John's father David had passed away 3 years ago, leaving behind his mother Grace and his sister Harper, who were living in a spacious house that seemed too large for just the two of them, so John and I decided to move in. Although it was a bit far from work, the house was spacious and had recently been renovated, making it a comfortable home. Grace was kind, and she welcomed me with a smile when we first met. Harper seemed shy and someone who was hard to read, giving off a plain impression. When Grace found out about my pregnancy, she was overjoyed, saying,
"Thank you for getting pregnant with John's child. I'll support you as much as I can,"
and celebrated grandly. When we decided to live together, she said,
"Let's have fun living together,"
which made me feel that there wouldn't be any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict in this house. Looking back, I was mistaken, and this was the beginning of my hell. On the first day of living together, Grace showed me around the house. Grace had always been considerate towards me, always saying,
"Thank you for being with John,"
whenever possible. My friends were against me living with my in-laws, but I wasn't worried at all. My only concern was whether I could get along with Harper. She was always looking down and never made eye contact when speaking. Honestly, it was hard to understand what Harper was thinking, and I found it creepy. She's just shy.
Harper is delicate but very skillful with her hands.
Grace and John both seemed very considerate of Harper. John bragged about Harper, being proud of her and adored her unusually. According to Grace, Harper would only ask to send a package once or twice a month and usually stayed in her room. She had been reclusive since high school and was not employed. However, she seemed to contribute generously to the household expenses. John's family was a bit strange but a good family, and I felt happy to be a part of it. That happiness lasted until we moved in. That night, after moving in, I was busy unpacking and didn't notice John had returned. I heard a loud voice from the entrance. It seemed like John was angry at the entrance. John, prone to complaining, often found fault with shop clerks and delivery personnel. Assuming he was complaining about damaged moving boxes, I headed to the entrance.
"What's wrong? Why are you yelling? Did something break?" "It's not that. The man of the house has returned. Come greet me at the entrance."
I was stunned by John's selfish remark.
"What?"
John seemed irritated by my lack of response.
"Don't mess with me. When the man of the house comes home, you're supposed to greet him at the entrance. It's common sense."
I was frightened by John's anger and apologized. "Sorry. I was busy unpacking." John glared at me with a red face.
"Also, I'm the man of the house. I'm the head of the household. From now on, you should honor me when you speak to me."
I was overwhelmed by his sudden change. That day, I was scolded by John for not preparing dinner and not getting the bath ready. Harper also came out of her room to see what was happening, but then she disappeared and didn't show her face again. After John went to bed, I cried in the bathroom. Why do I have to endure this treatment? I remembered the kind John before we got married. The days he took off his coat to cover me in the cold, the times he gently pulled me close when cars passed by. What was all that for? This isn't the real John. I tried to convince myself that he was just in a bad mood, that he's actually a kind and caring person. Otherwise, I couldn't see how I could continue with this marriage. I used to be so happy, but now all I feel is anxiety. And it seemed like everyone was against me, with no allies. All I could do was hope that John's mood would improve by tomorrow. But my faint hope was quickly dashed. John's attitude the next morning was the same as the night before. "Hey, or you." He would refer to me as so, not calling my name.
"Hey, you must always obey Mom,"
he said, treating me more like a slave than a housewife.
"Work for Harper's sake."
John kept saying it was for Harper's sake. His affection for Harper was abnormal. While John was smiling at Grace and Harper, he never showed me a smile. His gaze was always cold towards me. I started to have severe morning sickness around 5 months into my pregnancy, making it difficult to move. Whenever I lay down on the sofa, John would invariably scold me.
"Hey, what are you lying down for?"
"I feel sick from the morning sickness. Please let me rest a bit."
"Morning sickness? That's nothing serious. You're not working, so the least you could do is keep this house clean."
Hearing John's irritated voice made the cramps in my stomach feel worse. I was probably tensing up from stress. I knew it wasn't good for the baby, so I tried not to provoke John. If I woke up even slightly after John, he would yell at me. If he found me dozing off, he would start shouting. I was always under surveillance by John, feeling uncomfortable every day. I even thought about divorce, but I couldn't muster the courage for the sake of the baby. John had a good public facade, seen by others as the perfect husband and father. Most texts from friends where I used to work would be like,
"I'm jealous that John is your husband."
John was a trusted employee at the company, good at his job and taking care of his juniors. So he was relied upon by his boss. I couldn't argue and just replied nonchalantly, but the text I received the other day was unbelievable.
John was saying that you became selfish and that you're giving him a hard time ever since you got pregnant.
You better appreciate you have a good husband, or you're going to be punished. Reading that text, I lost all hope. John was playing the perfect husband outside and making me out to be the villain. Everyone saw his kind facade, but his real face was that of a selfish man. I complained about John to my parents, thinking my mom would understand, that she would comfort me. Maybe she would suggest coming back home to give birth. But my mom took John's side as well. She was completely deceived by John. I was lectured instead. I couldn't even go back to my parents' home. For the sake of the baby, I had no choice but to endure and keep living. But John wasn't my only enemy.
"Isn't this soup a bit too salty? Are you trying to make me sick?"
For some reason, Grace's attitude towards me changed, and she started ordering me around as well. Ever since John changed, Grace began to harass me. Every day, Grace would nitpick and make sarcastic comments.
"The way you fold the laundry isn't how we do it here. The bathroom isn't cleaned properly."
I'm sorry. I had no choice but to obediently follow Grace's words. But when I first met Grace, she had said,
"I'll support you as much as I can."
Where did that go? Was I foolish to believe those words? Grace took advantage of me doing all the housework to laze around during the day or go out to lunch with her friends. And she would always instruct me to make John's favorite dishes. Moreover, she specified shopping at high-end supermarkets. John's favorite dishes take a lot of effort and time to prepare. While feeling dizzy from morning sickness, I somehow managed to cook, and without any appetite, I sat down at the dining table, only to find that somehow the dishes were credited to Harper, with John stuffing his cheeks while lowering the corners of his eyes.
"Harper prepared the meal again today. You really did a great job, Harper."
Unbelievably, all my household chores were being credited to Harper. Harper made all the dishes, and she's also doing the cleaning and laundry. Grace explained to John. Harper, who stays in her room, wasn't there. I wonder how it feels to be praised for something you didn't do. What could Harper be thinking, staying in her room all this time? The harassment towards me wasn't just psychological. John didn't give me any living expenses. Before we got married, we agreed to contribute to a joint account. But John's portion never got deposited. I've been dipping into the savings my parents gave me before marriage and even used up my investment earnings. Recently, I almost had my debit card from my single days taken away. I resisted desperately to keep it. After that, the treatment I received from John and Grace was terrible. Thinking only about protecting the unborn child, I continued my daily chores. Such a life couldn't last. My mind and body were nearing their limits. Struggling to get by, I reached 8 months of pregnancy. One holiday, I spent the morning listening to Grace's complaints while doing the cleaning and laundry. I had to rest frequently because of the tightness in my stomach and could hardly move. Grace, who should understand the difficulties of late pregnancy, pretended not to notice and complained. After complaining, Grace left saying she had plans with friends. John had gone out for golf since the morning. Unable to move due to the physical strain of daily work, I reluctantly hired a housekeeping service. In the afternoon, the housekeeper came and did the cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and even meal prep. Feeling relieved that the chores were done, I collapsed on the sofa, unable to keep my eyes open. I needed to put away my half-drunk glass on the table or John would scold me. I must tidy up. But my consciousness faded. I woke up with a pain in my thigh. John was looking down at me with a furious expression. I instinctively rubbed my thigh, apparently kicked by John.
Hey, what are you doing?
Instead of looking at John, I looked upstairs. Harper was peering down. I hurriedly apologized.
I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well and must have fallen asleep. Pregnancy is no excuse to slack off on household chores.
John kicked my thigh again. I grimaced in pain.
Why are you letting a housekeeping service do the chores?
John was holding the housekeeping contract in his hand. I had left the contract on the table, intending to put it away but fell asleep. Normally, I would apologize, but I had reached my limit. I sighed.
I'm 8 months pregnant and have been warned of the risk of preterm labor due to strong abdominal tightness. Pregnancy isn't an illness. What are you slacking off for?
I stared at John. Who does he think the father of this child is?
You went out to enjoy golf. My body is at its limit.
I mustered the courage to confront John. John clenched his fists, trembling with anger. Despite my fear, I felt more indignant towards John.
Let me rest a bit. I hired the housekeeping service with my own money. There's nothing wrong with that.
John was about to retort angrily, but I couldn't take in his words. I ignored him and closed my eyes. John's loud yelling made me open my eyes again. He was clutching a glass on the table, about to throw it at me. I covered my stomach with my hands and closed my eyes. Then I heard the sound of breaking glass. When I opened my eyes, Harper was crouched in front of me. Harper was holding her head with her hands. Blood was seeping from her hands.
Harper, are you okay?
I jumped up and called out to her. Harper, still crouching. I'm okay, she replied in a weak voice. The floor was staining with blood. John stood there, dumbfounded. Even when I called out to John, he remained frozen, clutching his head. Despite being shaken, I managed to call for an ambulance. With Harper still crouched down, I brought a towel and pressed it against her head. The towel quickly soaked with blood. The amount of blood made me fear for Harper's life. I was terrified, but I knew Harper was the real victim here. Wanting to comfort her, I hugged her as tightly as I could. After a while, I heard sirens, and the ambulance arrived. I managed to help Harper stand up and walked her to the entrance, supporting her. John, in a panic,
I'm not to blame. It's your fault for not doing the chores,
kept muttering. At the entrance, I told John to accompany us in the ambulance. However, Harper objected.
My brother? No, he's the one who hurt me. I don't want him.
John looked displeased, but said nothing more. Urged by the paramedics, I got into the ambulance. Harper, lying down, looked at me. Sis, take this. Harper handed me her smartphone. I nodded and took it firmly. This would become our weapon. I thanked Harper. Upon arriving at the hospital, Harper was immediately taken to the treatment room. I had informed John of the hospital's name where Harper was taken. While waiting for Harper's treatment, John and Grace arrived.
What did you do to Harper?
Grace immediately directed her anger at me upon arrival. I wanted to retaliate but restrained myself due to being in a hospital, mindful of other patients. Grace, undeterred by the surroundings, loudly complained to me.
I won't forgive you if Harper's work is affected.
I was astounded by her concern. Grace was more worried about Harper's loss of income than her well-being. Harper's profession is a jewelry designer. She designs rings, earrings, and bracelets from her room. Highly popular and contracted with major jewelry brands. Harper's income must be significantly higher than John's annual salary. Grace's primary concern seemed to be the potential loss of income. Such a terrible mother. The seldom used car and probably even their house were likely purchased with Harper's earnings. It was exactly as I had heard from Harper. Harper had once told me, "Mom cares more about my money than me." Watching Grace blame me, John started accusing me as well.
That's right, it's your fault. This happened because you slacked off on the chores. It's all your fault.
While they berated me nonsensically, two men in suits approached from behind. I interrupted John and Grace's complaints.
Should we ask these gentlemen here if I'm really to blame?
John and Grace turned around in surprise.
These are the police officers I called.
John and Grace were shocked.
Why would you call the police?
Because this is a serious assault case. John threw a glass, and Harper got seriously injured.
What are you talking about? You did it.
How could they twist the story like that? I stared at John, who averted his eyes. Sighing, I began playing a video on Harper's smartphone that I had received. The video captured me being kicked by John and everything up until I called the ambulance. Watching the video, Grace turned pale. She looked at John.
John, what is this all about?
John remained silent, head down. Grace turned to me.
Why do you have Harper's phone? Harper gave it to me to protect me. To protect you? What do you mean? Explain.
Grace demanded, trembling. In this household, I had one ally. Harper was on my side. From the day we moved in, Harper was aware of Grace's harassment and John's violence. She occasionally came out of her room to check on me. Horrified by how badly I was treated, and decided to leave evidence by installing hidden cameras around the house. I showed Grace additional footage.
Everything you've done to me is captured here.
The footage, complete with audio, captured John's verbal abuse and Grace's dehumanizing behavior, eliciting puzzled looks from the police officers present. John and Grace's faces contorted.
Who's the real culprit here?
I smiled maliciously.
But why would Harper side with you?
I smiled broadly.
That's because Harper was bullied and exploited by you.
I said in a low, menacing voice. Harper, too, was a victim of Grace. John and Grace, perhaps intimidated by my presence, took a step back. Until John and I lived together, Harper was harassed by Grace. Harper started her career as a jewelry designer while a student, initially earning very little. Grace, frustrated that Harper's pursuit was not profitable, tried to kick her out. It was David, still alive at the time, who stopped her. David created a bank account specifically for Harper and provided financial support. Eventually, Harper's talent was recognized, and she started earning an income, but by then, David had passed away. Harper planned to leave home to escape Grace, but found herself unable to do so when Grace took control of her bank account. For Grace, keeping Harper at home meant having more income. Moreover, with Harper around, John would often return home. This made Grace even less willing to let Harper go. Grace was frequently harsh to Harper. She repeatedly say,
John is my only real child.
Harper had a boyfriend and considered eloping when our living together was decided. And that's when the harassment shifted towards me. The night we moved in, I was berated by Grace and ended up crying in the bathroom. That was when Harper approached me.
I never thought she would bully a pregnant woman. That person is a devil in human form. Will you join me in defeating the devil?
From that day on, our joint struggle against Grace began. The smartphone Harper handed me in the ambulance became our weapon. Grace was flustered by the incontrovertible video evidence. John stood frozen, trembling. At that moment, the police approached John and Grace.
Let's hear the details at the police station,
they said in a cold, impersonal tone. John turned to leave, but the police blocked his way.
I haven't done anything wrong. I have no obligation to go,
said Grace, trying to push past the police. Then, the treatment room door opened, and Harper, with a bandage on her head, came out in a wheelchair.
Are you okay, Harper? I'm fine, brother,
Harper replied without looking at John and asked the police to take them away.
Please take these two to the police station quickly. I'll do anything. Testify, provide evidence, you name it.
Harper glared coldly at John and Grace. The police took John and Grace by the arms and led them away. Are you okay, Harper? I rushed to Harper after the police took John and Grace away.
Yes, I'm fine. Just a small cut on my forehead,
Harper said, smiling at me. I smiled back, relieved.
Head bleeds easily. And I'm just in my wheelchair for a precaution since I injured my head. I'm glad it's not serious.
Harper couldn't be discharged until the test results came out and had to be hospitalized for the day. As I was about to go back for our things, Harper's boyfriend, Michael, arrived. Michael was shocked to see Harper in the wheelchair and hugged her, half crying. Harper, reassured, also cried. I quietly left the room, not wanting to intrude. The next day, Harper was discharged after the tests showed no serious issues. Harper and I returned home together. Michael, worried, followed us. Grace and John had not yet returned. We decided to search for Harper's debit card, thinking it was our only chance. In the afternoon, John and Grace returned. Seeing me sitting on the living room sofa, they immediately started accusing me.
How could you? Yeah, because of you, Mom and I got lectured at the police station, John said.
I stood my ground, retorting. After all, I had strong allies by my side.
Be glad you weren't filed a complaint against it. You even led my sister astray. I'll never forgive you for this.
Then, Harper and Michael came down the stairs.
Who's been led astray?
John, seeing Harper, was taken aback. Harper held the debit card in her hand. Grace's expression changed instantly when she found it.
John, Mia wants to give you something.
Harper hinted at me with a look. I presented the divorce papers in front of John.
You're not seriously thinking of divorcing me, are you? Yes, I am.
John clutched the divorce papers tightly.
Enough with the jokes. Just sign it. It's more manly to just fill it out quickly. I've always thought you and Mia weren't a good match. What do you mean? Mia is too good for you. Now, hurry up and write.
Like under a spell, John placed the divorce papers on the living room table and started to fill them in. John, who used to verbally abuse me and treat me like a slave, was now doing exactly as his sister had said. I can see why Harper called John creepy. Even as he filled out the divorce papers, John kept looking at Harper. I snatched the divorce papers as if to claim them. Submitting these would sever my ties with this house.
Shall we go then?
John tried to reach out to Harper. Unperturbed, Harper took Michael's hand and headed for the entrance. I gave John and Grace a cold look.
I will never forget what you did to me, Grace. And don't you forget either, John.
With that, I left the house with Harper and the others.
This isn't over yet,
I muttered to myself. I sent an email to John's workplace, dubbing it a divorce notification. I also sent a video to my friend at his workplace. Now, everyone will see John's true colors. Lately, he hasn't been talking to anyone. My friend emailed me.
I think John's going to quit his job soon.
Later, I consulted a lawyer for free advice and filed for divorce alimony and child support. Given John's nature, I also requested a restraining order to prevent stalking. I agreed not to file a police report in exchange for getting the child support in a lump sum. Now, I won't have to worry about non-payment. John didn't come near me thanks to the restraining order, but I heard he came begging to Harper. John ambushed Harper on her way home, crying and clinging to her feet. John directed all his anger at Grace.
It's your fault Harper hates me. Mia leaving is also your fault. You took away all my happiness.
After lashing out at Grace with his grievances, he left the house. Harper told me that Grace had contacted her. Grace seems to be living like a recluse, concerned about the neighbors' eyes. To that Harper told me,
"This is the retribution for what she did to me."
with a cold look. 2 months later, I gave birth to a healthy boy. Harper was there for the birth.
"I want to have a cute baby like yours someday."
Michael, standing behind her, blushed, which I found adorable. I sent the video to my parents, who had blindly trusted John and refused to believe me. My parents apologized profusely and went to complain to Grace. Their house had become littered with trash with no one cleaning. Grace's response was slow, even to their complaints, and my parents left feeling terrified. Anyway, I have a son who is the apple of my eye and a strong friend named Harper. Life as a single mother will have its challenges, but it seems like it will be enjoyable. I still have the money I saved from investments before marriage, and it's doing well, so there's no rush to return to work. Seeing how remorseful my parents are, it might be nice to go back home. I'm considering taking it easy at my parents' house for a while.
A wife who neglects her housework is not needed in this house, right? Such a useless woman does not deserve to be my son's wife. Leave this house!
Chloe, my mother-in-law, said this to me, and with a smile, I replied, "Understood." I left the house and went back to my parents' home. Probably Chloe will storm into my parents' home. I don't know what will happen to me from now on. I am Sophia, a 25-year-old housewife. I married Timothy last year and have been living a smooth life. Except for one thing, Chloe's presence makes our newlywed life less peaceful. Chloe is a son-obsessed, clingy mother. Especially since Timothy is an only child. We live at a medium distance and meet only a few times a year. Whenever I see Chloe, she annoyingly checks whether I am taking good care of Timothy. Last time we met, "You're taking care of Timothy properly, right?"
Listen, Timothy loves meat and hates fish.
You remember that, right?
I remember you said during our first meeting that your favorite dish to cook is fish stew. If you're serving Timothy the same thing, I won't let it slide.
She said. Chloe seems desperate to make sure I am doing my household duties and making meals that Timothy enjoys. Timothy loves the fish stew I make, and we have never had any trouble with meals. I can let it go, but she looked at my clothes, saying, "You're dressed so inappropriately."
When standing beside Timothy, you should dress to match him. A short skirt? How vulgar. Are you trying to tempt other men?
I was utterly baffled. My skirt was knee-length and quite modest. Timothy has a simple style, and my outfit that day matched his. It seemed Chloe didn't want me to outshine Timothy. When you two are together, everyone's eyes go to Sophia.
It's because of the bright colors of your clothes. From now on, wear a white shirt and black pants. Don't wear anything else.
Chloe, beaming as if she had a great idea, got a wry smile from me. Thankfully, Timothy stood up for me. "What are you talking about, Mom? I think Sophia is cute no matter what she wears, and she should wear what she likes. Stop hassling her with your weird demands." Saying. Chloe often comes up with these nonsensical requests. On the other hand, my father-in-law is harmless but doesn't contribute positively either. He always seems preoccupied, either reading the newspaper or watching news on TV, never joining in our conversations. He turned a blind eye to whatever Chloe said to me, right in front of him. I've tried to talk to him several times since getting married. But because he shows no interest in chatting, the conversation dies down quickly. Honestly, visiting my in-laws has always been a burdensome event for me. Then one day, I started feeling unwell and couldn't manage the household chores. I thought my headache and slight fever would pass, but Timothy was worried and decided we should visit a doctor the next day. It was a Saturday, and Timothy had the day off. Our usual clinic was only open in the morning on Saturdays. The doctor asked if I could be pregnant, and I remembered my period was late.
Maybe I am pregnant,
I said, and took a pregnancy test right there. The result was positive. We immediately visited a nearby gynecologist, and it was confirmed I was pregnant. Timothy and I were overjoyed. Especially Timothy, with tears streaming down his face.
Sophia, thank you.
He kept thanking me over and over again. But when we reported the pregnancy to our parents, Chloe showed up at our house carrying a huge bag. I was suffering from severe morning sickness and was holed up in the bathroom, unable to come out. As the doorbell was repeatedly rung, I hurried out of the bathroom to answer it, and there was Chloe.
Chloe? You were trying to pretend you weren't home, weren't you?
No, I was just in the bathroom.
I don't care, just let me in.
I staggered to the door and opened it. Chloe was holding a large Boston bag, and I had a bad feeling. We're going to live together until the baby grows up. I was stunned by Chloe's sudden words. I couldn't just leave her at the entrance, so I let her into the house. I'll make some coffee, I said, and headed to the kitchen, and called Timothy while waiting for the water to boil. It was a weekday afternoon, and Timothy was at work as usual. I was worried if he would answer, but he did after a few rings. Sophia? Is something wrong?
Hey, Chloe came over. She's carrying a big bag. Do you know anything?
Eh? I haven't heard anything. But she said she would come by soon. I never thought she'd come when I'm not home.
I see. I'll ask Chloe for the details.
Sorry. If Mom says something weird, you can kick her out. Oh, sorry, I have to hang up. Timothy seemed busy and hung up.
As if I can just kick her out because she says something weird. He really doesn't get it.
I sighed a little. Timothy is generally kind and cherishes me, but he doesn't think through the consequences of prioritizing my wishes. I can imagine the uproar Chloe would make if I tried to kick her out. For now, I just prepared the coffee and served it to Chloe. Chloe, what brings you here today? Timothy is at work. He'll be home around 6 p.m.
This doesn't look good.
What? Confused by Chloe's sudden remark, I watched as she took a sip of the coffee I had prepared. Young people are hopeless. They can't even make a decent cup of coffee. Poor Timothy, having to drink this. I'll teach you how to make coffee right now. Come here. I'm sorry, my morning sickness is quite bad. Could we do this some other time when I'm feeling better? It's just morning sickness. It's fine, you'll feel better if you eat something. Come on, hurry up. Then, for an hour, Chloe's coffee-making lesson began. As I started feeling nauseous, Chloe opened the cupboard on her own, took out a plate, and placed a piece of bread. Eat this. You'll feel better if you eat. The smell of the bread made me feel even sicker, and I ran to the bathroom. With a headache and nausea, my mind was a blur. For the 3 hours until Timothy came home, I was holed up in the bathroom. Chloe kept knocking on the door in front of the bathroom, but I didn't have the energy to respond. Around 6 p.m., Timothy came home. First, Timothy was surprised to see Chloe making a fuss in front of the bathroom. I had fallen asleep in the bathroom, and when I woke up, Chloe and Timothy were arguing outside. Why did you suddenly come? Sophia is suffering from morning sickness, don't be a nuisance. I came to supervise whether this girl is properly doing her housework as a housewife. I bet she's just using her morning sickness as an excuse to be lazy. I was shocked that she can't even make coffee properly. The coffee Sophia makes is delicious. And what's this supervision about? Sophia isn't someone who would use morning sickness as an excuse to slack off on housework. If she couldn't do it, maybe her morning sickness is really bad? Sophia, you were holed up in the bathroom for 3 hours. Timothy is so naive, he's easily deceived. I really need to be here to guide Sophia. I got married to make those around me happy. Even if Sophia were slacking off, I wouldn't mind. As long as she's doing what she wants and staying by my side, I don't want anything more. No need for guidance. Please go home. I smiled at Timothy's words. The symptoms of my morning sickness had subsided, so I opened the bathroom door. Welcome home, Timothy. Chloe, sorry for leaving you alone.
You! How can you lock yourself in the bathroom when you have a guest? What kind of nerve do you have?
Well, I couldn't show Chloe my messy state, so I locked myself in the bathroom. I'm truly sorry about that.
Anyway, I've made dinner, so make sure you eat all of it.
With that, Chloe said, and Timothy pointed to the entrance. No, Mom, please go home.
No way. I've already told Dad that I'm staying here. I don't trust young people. See, she didn't even prepare dinner because she was holed up in the bathroom with morning sickness. I'm definitely not going back.
Chloe stubbornly refused to move. Forcing her out would not satisfy Chloe, so I decided to allow her to stay. Then, maybe you can stay for a while. But I knew Timothy was worried about me, but kicking her out now would only create more trouble later. I smiled at Timothy to reassure him. It's okay. After that, Chloe tried to force me to eat chicken. Lately, I've been mainly eating vegetables and fruits. With severe morning sickness, even the sight of fried food, let alone bread, made me feel sick. Chloe complained about this too, but Timothy was completely on my side, which was a great help. The next day, worried about leaving me alone with Chloe. Call me if anything happens. It's okay to lock yourself in the bathroom, Timothy said to me before going to work. As expected, Chloe complained about everything I did. If I cleaned, she complained I was too slow. If I did laundry, she said I should care more for Timothy's clothes than mine. Each time, all right, I just responded. When morning sickness hit and I rushed to the bathroom, Chloe would knock on the door. When I came out,
keep bathroom visits under 5 minutes,
she said. Chloe did nothing but complain, while I struggled with housework in the midst of severe morning sickness. I knew this would happen when I allowed Chloe to stay, but honestly, I wanted her to go back to the in-laws' house soon. I did as much as Chloe said as I could without overexerting myself. Timothy, except for one day when he was late due to a company drinking party, came home early without overtime, and there didn't seem to be any major problems. After about 5 days of living like this, Chloe finally said something to me. That day, my morning sickness was particularly bad, and in the middle of cleaning, I left the vacuum cleaner and rushed to the bathroom, unable to come out for many minutes. Then Chloe stood in front of the bathroom and began to yell.
Hey you! Weren't you in the middle of cleaning? Are you expecting me to do it? Enough is enough! Claiming to have severe morning sickness, are you just slacking off? Thinking you can just hide in the bathroom?
I didn't have the energy to respond to Chloe, but she kept complaining endlessly. The symptoms of my morning sickness had subsided, but I didn't feel like facing the continually fussing Chloe, so I just sat on the toilet seat waiting for Chloe to calm down. As I was sighing, wondering whether to call Timothy.
A wife who neglects her housework is not needed in this house, right? Such a useless woman does not deserve to be my son's wife.
Leave this house, Chloe suddenly said. I immediately came out of the bathroom and understood. I replied with a broad smile and went straight to my room. Chloe followed me, looking puzzled, but I locked the door to my room, making sure she couldn't enter. Then, I packed a travel bag with some clothes and valuables that I had stored in my closet. Knowing Chloe would try to stop me if I left now, I waited until she left the front of my room. Chloe kept knocking on my room's door, but after waiting for about 2 hours, she finally left. I heard a door close in the distance, probably her going to the bathroom. I grabbed my bag and immediately left the house, getting a taxi to my parents' home. When I arrived at my parents' house, my mom, who was a housewife and at home, was very surprised. My dad wasn't at work, so I explained the situation to my mom first. I understand that Chloe loves her son and doesn't think highly of me. But still, it's annoying to be complained at up close. My mom didn't get particularly angry, but just gave a wry smile. Well, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict is common everywhere. It might be good for you to stay home for a while. Chloe seems like she can look after Timothy. You think so?
Aren't you going to get mad about what she's doing to your daughter?
Well, Sophia, you must be up to something, right? My mom seemed to see right through everything. Then, I contacted Timothy and told him I would stay at my parents' house until Chloe went back home. Timothy also felt it was safer that way, and I relaxed at my parents' house for the first time in a long time. The next day, as expected, Chloe came to my parents' house. When I opened the door and showed my face, Chloe turned red and started making a fuss.
Why are you back at your parents' house? Hurry back and make Timothy's dinner. It's a failure as a wife to go to such lengths to avoid housework.
But I replied with a smile. Eh? I just did what you told me to, right? You said to leave, didn't you? Are you saying I should have slept outside instead of going back to my parents' house?
What's with this girl? So irritating. I didn't really mean for you to leave. I'm just saying you should do your housework properly.
I was doing my housework as you told me to. I don't understand why I have to do it quickly, but the quality of my housework doesn't change just because I went to the bathroom in the middle. Then Chloe's eyes narrowed in anger.
Don't talk nonsense. When I was pregnant, I didn't go to the bathroom so much. Eating makes the nausea go away. Despite that, you don't listen.
Then, from behind me, Mom came. With a troubled look, Mom gently spoke to Chloe. Chloe, you had a different symptom, didn't you? My daughter has different symptoms. She's a different person, so it's natural for her morning sickness symptoms to be different. Please don't assume she's the same just because you experienced it.
What are you saying? Children should listen to their parents.
At that, Chloe seemed taken aback for a moment, and I smiled. Huh. I see. So Chloe, you just wanted to manipulate me to do as you wish? No one will act exactly as you want them to. That includes Stephen as well. Confused by my words, Chloe tilted her head. Stephen? Your husband. You're so busy meddling in your son's household that you've completely forgotten about your own. Perhaps it's time you return to your own home? Then Chloe started making a phone call. Probably to her husband's number. But the call didn't connect, it seemed like she was blocked, and in a panic, Chloe rushed back home. Later, I heard from Timothy that when Chloe returned to the in-laws' house, there was only a divorce application stamped by her husband and a note with a single line on the table. The note apparently said that he would take all the retirement pay as the distribution of property, and everything else would be left to her. Chloe tried contacting her husband at his workplace, but he had already retired, and his whereabouts became unknown. But in reality, he hasn't retired from his job yet. He was staying for a month for handover and had asked the company to tell Chloe that he had retired if she called. Actually, Timothy and I knew where he was. He was staying in a business hotel and planning to live with a relative in a distant region after retirement. We were supposed to inform him when Chloe filed for divorce, and he said he wanted to start a new life then. About a week ago, when Chloe came to my house and it got late, I called him. Chloe is at our house, are you okay, Stephen? Aren't you lonely by yourself? When I asked him kindly, Raphael, who usually hardly spoke, opened up about his true feelings. Maybe because it was over the phone and not face to face, he could speak without stress. Sophia, you're the only one who worries about someone like me. My wife has always treated me like an ATM, never as a husband. When Timothy was young, if I tried to play with him, she'd say, "Don't touch him, you're dirty, stay away." Maybe that's why Timothy became unsure how to interact with me. I've always been timid and lived a rather dull life under my wife's thumb. You're right, I've always been lonely. At that moment, I thought I could use Raphael to drive Chloe away. There would still be interactions with Chloe in the future. If I forced her out now, I could be endlessly complained at. In the worst case, if Chloe persuaded Raphael to leave their house and said they had nowhere to go, they might both end up at our house, making it difficult for us to refuse. I discussed it with Timothy, and he had been aware since he was young that his parents were a sham couple and wanted to do something about it. I had Timothy pretend to be working overtime and visit the in-laws' house to have a heart-to-heart talk with Phil. Phil then confessed to Timothy that he wanted a divorce from Chloe. So, we decided to have Phil proceed with the preparations for the divorce. I had been waiting for the right moment when Chloe would seriously listen to me. I thought she might calm down a bit in a place away from her own territory, like my parents' house, and thankfully, it worked better than expected. Faced with her own issues, Chloe quickly returned to the in-laws' house, so I decided to go back to my house too. Timothy and I then persuaded Chloe. We carefully explained to her how she had been making Phil suffer, that Phil wanted to be free, and that if she continued to be difficult, Phil was prepared to take the matter to court. We warned her that if it came to a court case, both Timothy and I would side with Phil. Finally, Chloe stamped the divorce papers and submitted them to the office. After that, Chloe ended up living alone in the in-laws' house. She seemed lonely and wanted to live in our house, but Timothy firmly refused.
If you come here, Sophia will go back to her parents' house. If that happens, I'll never consider you as my mother again. Just like you ignored Dad, I'll ignore you as if you didn't exist.
With Timothy's firm statement, Chloe, dejected, went back to the in-laws' house. I feel fortunate to have such a reliable husband. As for Phil, as soon as Timothy informed him about the finalized divorce, he immediately moved out of the relative's house and into a small apartment. He got a job in the same field as before his retirement. Though his income dropped a bit, he's more relaxed than when he lived with Chloe and now happily immerses himself in his hobbies every day. Later, I safely gave birth to a baby. A healthy girl. When I'm in trouble, my mom helps as much as possible, and Chloe is only allowed to meet my daughter when I permit it. Thanks to this, I'm managing to raise my child without stress. I believe that, though there will be challenges ahead, as long as I'm with Timothy, who cares deeply for me, we can overcome anything.